All right, welcome back to the deep dive. If you are prepping for the UPSC, or just fascinated by India's past, you're in the right place. We're continuing our deep dive into modern Indian history, and today we're focusing on a figure who really embodies this fascinating blend of tradition and progress, Syed Ahmad Khan. Now, this is part two of our exploration, so if you missed the first part, definitely catch up. It'll give you that crucial context.
Absolutely crucial context.
And before we get started, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe for more insightful deep dives.
Syed Ahmad Khan, you'll definitely encounter his name in your UPSC studies. But his story, it goes way beyond just dates and names. He really represents, the complexities of India in the 19th century, a period of just immense change under British rule.
Okay, so can you paint the picture for us? What was India like during Syed Ahmad Khan's time?
Imagine India in the 1800s. The British Raj is in full swing, transforming everything. Politics, economics, culture, education, you name it. This is the world Syed Ahmad Khan was born into. A world where the old order was being challenged by new ideas and systems.
And he wasn't just observing these changes, right? He was deeply embedded in this evolving world.
Absolutely. His family had strong ties to the Mughal court.
Yeah.
This had immense cultural and historical significance. But then he also served in the British administration, so he had this unique perspective, both sides of this complex equation. He was seeing the machinery of power from the inside,
Yeah.
while also understanding the cultural and social impact on the ground level. I imagine that must have shaped his worldview profoundly.
You're exactly right. And this dual perspective becomes even more critical after the 1857 revolt, a real turning point in Indian history. Syed Ahmad Khan saw the upheaval firsthand, and it really pushed him to think deeply about the root causes of the conflict.
He even wrote a pamphlet about it, right? The causes of the Indian Revolt.
Yes, this pamphlet is fascinating because it reveals his early political thinking. He analyzes the events leading up to the revolt, trying to understand the tensions between British rule and Indian society. So we have this backdrop: British influence, social unrest, and Syed Ahmad Khan trying to navigate these really turbulent waters. But what really sets him apart is his unwavering belief in education.
This is where he truly shines. He firmly believed that modern education was the key to unlocking progress for the Muslim community in this new era, not just to keep up with the changing times, but to truly thrive in them.
And this belief led him to launch the Aligarh Movement, right, which was all about promoting modern education,
Yeah.
particularly for Muslims,
You got it.
if I remember my history lessons correctly.
He founded the Scientific Society in Aligarh in 1864, and one of their most groundbreaking initiatives was translating Western works into Indian languages. Think about that. Making knowledge accessible to a wider audience, bridging the gap between Western thought and Indian scholarship.
That's remarkable. It shows a deep understanding of the power of knowledge and its potential to really empower communities. It wasn't just about adopting Western ideas. It was about making them relevant, making them accessible to the Indian context.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And to really amplify his message, he launched the Aligarh Institute Gazette, a platform to share the society's activities, engage in intellectual debates, and spread awareness about the importance of modern education.
Wow. Using media to promote his ideas. It's a strategy that's still relevant today. But his vision went far beyond just societies and publications. He wanted to create an institution, a place where Muslim students could receive a world-class education.
And that vision led to the establishment of the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College in 1877, which later became the renowned Aligarh Muslim University. And this wasn't just any college. He modeled it after prestigious institutions like Oxford and Cambridge.
That's incredibly ambitious. What was his thinking behind that? Why model it after British universities?
He wanted to create an institution that blended the best of Western and Islamic thought, a place where Muslim students could receive an education that was both modern and rooted in their own cultural heritage.
So it wasn't just about replicating a Western model. It was about creating something unique, something that would meet the specific needs of the Indian Muslim community.
You're right. He emphasized the importance of English language instruction, but he also made sure that Islamic teachings were integral to the curriculum. He understood that true progress required a balance, embracing new knowledge, while preserving one's own cultural identity.
That's a crucial insight, especially for someone preparing for the UPSC. It really highlights Syed Ahmad Khan's nuanced approach to education. his understanding of the complexities of social change.
Exactly. He wasn't just about rote learning or blind imitation. He wanted to cultivate critical thinking, to empower students to engage with the world around them from a position of knowledge and understanding. And the lasting impact of Aligarh Muslim University on Muslim intellectual and social development in India really is a testament to the power of his vision.
We've been talking about Syed Ahmad Khan's groundbreaking work in education, particularly with the founding of Aligarh Muslim University. His efforts to blend Western and Islamic thought in education, they're truly remarkable. But he wasn't just an education reformer, right?
Right. He recognized that true progress, it couldn't be confined to the classroom. It had to extend to the very fabric of society. So he tackled social issues head on, advocating for change, even when it meant challenging these deeply entrenched norms.
And some of those issues, they were pretty controversial for the time, weren't they? He spoke out against practices like purdah, polygamy, even certain interpretations of Islamic law related to divorce.
He did. And, these stances, they often put him at odds with the more conservative elements within the Muslim community. He really believed that these practices were holding back progress, hindering the community's ability to adapt to these changing times.
It takes real courage to challenge the status quo like that, especially when it comes to religious and social norms. It's easy to see why he's considered a pioneer of social reform in India. And he didn't just speak about these issues. He actively worked to bring about change.
Right. He understood the power of communication, and he used it effectively. He founded a magazine called Tahzib-ul-Akhlaq, which translates to Social Reformer, and he used it as a platform to advocate for his ideas and spark debate within the community.
Yeah, so just like with his educational reforms, he understood the importance of reaching a wider audience. He wasn't just an academic, he was a public intellectual, engaging with the pressing social issues of his time. And he often used his writing to challenge, traditional interpretations of Islamic texts, didn't he?
Yeah, that's a key point for anyone studying him for the UPSC exam. Syed Ahmad Khan believed that Islam was inherently rational, and that many social practices attributed to religion were actually cultural constructs that needed to be reevaluated in the light of modern thought.
This approach, it must have been revolutionary at the time, especially given the prevailing social and religious climate. It shows his deep intellectual engagement with his faith and his commitment to reconciling tradition with progress.
His writings, they provide these fascinating insights into his attempts to bridge these seemingly disparate worlds. He wrote extensively on a range of topics, from religious philosophy to history and social commentary. One of his most notable works is Asar-us-Sanadid, a comprehensive study of Delhi's architecture.
That sounds intriguing. It's not just a dry historical account. It's like a window into the city's rich past, seen through the eyes of someone deeply connected to its cultural heritage.
Exactly. And then there's Asbabi Bagawadahind, his analysis of the 1857 revolt. This work, it's crucial for understanding his political views, especially his evolving perspective on British rule and its impact on India.
It's incredible to think about the breadth of his intellectual pursuits, from architecture and history to social reform and religious philosophy. He was deeply engaged in the intellectual landscape of his time. And his work, Tabyin-ul-Kalam, shows his dedication to bridging the gap between faith and reason.
Yeah. In Tabyin-ul-Kalam, he really delves into the compatibility of Islamic teachings with modern scientific thought, trying to demonstrate that the two, they're not mutually exclusive. This work, it really reflects his commitment to promoting a rational and enlightened understanding of Islam.
All of this, it shows this complex and multifaceted personality, someone who is deeply invested in, pushing the boundaries of thought and reform. But there's one aspect of his legacy that's often debated, and that's his stance on the Indian national movement.
This is where things get really interesting and potentially challenging. For someone studying modern Indian history, Syed Ahmad Khan, despite his progressive views on education and social reform, he had reservations about Muslims actively participating in the burgeoning nationalist movement.
That seems almost paradoxical, doesn't it? He was advocating for progress and empowerment, yet he seemed hesitant about joining a movement aimed at achieving independence from British rule. So what was his reasoning behind that?
Well, it's important to remember the context. He had witnessed the violence and upheaval of the 1857 revolt firsthand. This experience, coupled with his understanding of the power dynamics at play, led him to believe that direct confrontation with the British could be detrimental to the Muslim community, especially in the short term.
So it wasn't necessarily about opposing the idea of independence, but rather about strategically choosing a different path to achieve progress for the Muslim community. He seemed to believe that, Education and social reform were more crucial at that stage than engaging in potentially volatile political activism.
Hit the nail on the head. He believed that. Building a strong foundation within the community was essential. Before taking on the challenges of political agitation, he saw education, social reform, and economic upliftment as like the building blocks for long-term empowerment.
It's like he was prioritizing a more gradual and strategic approach to achieving progress, focusing on building internal strength before engaging in these external power struggles.
Precisely. He advocated for a path that emphasized loyalty to the British, while simultaneously working within the system to improve the lives of Muslims. Through education and social reform, he believed that, by demonstrating their intellectual and social progress, Muslims could eventually gain a stronger position within Indian society.
But this approach, while perhaps understandable in the context of his time, it wasn't without its complexities, was it? It's often criticized for contributing to a sense of separatism between Hindus and Muslims, potentially hindering the development of a unified national identity.
That's a valid point, and it's something that historians and scholars, continue to debate. His emphasis on Muslim identity and separate development, though intended to protect and empower the community, could be seen as inadvertently furthering divisions within Indian society. And unfortunately, as history often shows us, these divisions, they can be exploited for political gain.
So we see this tension between his progressive vision for the Muslim community and his cautious approach to engaging with the larger national movement. It raises some important questions about the complexities of identity politics and the unintended consequences of even the most well-intentioned actions.
Exactly. And this is where studying Syed Ahmad Khan becomes particularly relevant, not just for UPSC aspirants, but for anyone interested in understanding the nuances of history and its impact on the present. His life and legacy, they offer a valuable case study of how individual actions, motivations, and historical context all intersect to shape the course of events.
So we've been unpacking the life and work of Syed Ahmad Khan, a true titan of 19th century India, someone who tackled education, social reform, and even grappled with Islam's role in a rapidly changing world.
And as we've seen, his legacy is one of fascinating contradictions. A reformer who also upheld certain traditions, a champion of education who advocated for a distinct path for the Muslim community. It's this complexity that makes him so relevant, even today.
It's like his story holds up a mirror to our own times. We're still grappling with many of the same issues he faced: identity, progress, the role of tradition in a modernizing society.
Exactly. Take his emphasis on education as a tool for empowerment. That resonates so deeply today as we see these global efforts to bridge educational gaps and create opportunities for marginalized communities. Syed Ahmad Khan, he understood that knowledge is power, and that access to education is fundamental to social progress.
And his courage in challenging social norms within his own community, that's inspiring too. He wasn't afraid to speak out against practices he saw as harmful, even when it meant facing criticism and opposition.
That willingness to challenge the status quo, it's something we see in reformers and activists throughout history, and even today, whether it's fighting for gender equality, advocating for LGBTQ+ rights, or pushing for environmental justice. There's a clear echo of Syed Ahmad Khan's spirit in these movements.
But as we've discussed, his legacy, it isn't without its shadows. His views on the Indian national movement, particularly his advocacy for a separate path for Muslims, they're still debated. And I think it's crucial to acknowledge the complexities of his stance, even as we admire his other achievements.
Absolutely. His approach, though rooted in a desire to protect the Muslim community, it had unintended consequences. It contributed to a sense of separatism that, unfortunately, was exploited by some for political gain, further dividing communities along religious lines. And this serves as a stark reminder that even the most well-intentioned actions can have unforeseen and sometimes harmful outcomes.
It's a cautionary tale that highlights the importance of considering the long-term impacts of our choices, especially when it comes to identity politics and social change. It's about understanding that progress. It isn't always linear, and there are often unintended consequences that we need to grapple with.
And this is where studying history becomes so crucial. It's not just about memorizing dates and events. It's about understanding the complexities of human motivation, the ripple effects of actions, and the interplay of individual choices and historical forces.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Syed Ahmad Khan's life and legacy, what key takeaways would you highlight for our listeners, especially those prepping for the UPSC, or just trying to make sense of India's complex past?
I think one of the most important takeaways is the value of nuanced thinking. Syed Ahmad Khan's life, It defies easy categorization. He was both a progressive reformer and a staunch advocate for his community's distinct identity. He embraced modern education while remaining deeply rooted in his own cultural and religious traditions.
So it's not about labeling him
Mm.
as simply good or bad,
Yeah.
but rather understanding the context,
Mm.
the motivations,
Yeah.
and the multifaceted nature of his beliefs and actions.
Exactly. And this applies not just to Syed Ahmad Khan, but to the study of history in general. We need to move beyond these simplistic narratives and engage with the messy, complicated realities of the past.
This deep dive has been a fantastic journey through a pivotal period in Indian history and a close look at a figure who really embodied both the promise and the challenges of that era. We've explored his groundbreaking work in education, his courageous efforts at social reform, and his complex and often controversial views on the national movement.
And while we've covered a lot of ground, remember, this is just a starting point. We encourage you to continue exploring, to delve deeper into Syed Ahmad Khan's writings and the broader history of modern India.
And as always, thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more fascinating journeys into the past.